All right. So we'll take two. Welcome. Maybe she can edit that first part out. If not, they'll just have to excuse it as a rookie with some of this Zoom technology. So our agenda for today tries to talk a little bit, and this is a very interactive type of session too. If you have questions or if you have feedback in your experiences, that's really important. We'll talk a little bit about the roles, skills, what we're looking for if you find yourself actually recruiting judges for an event, information to help you explain to others what FIRST is all about in FIRST judging. We'll talk some about the engineering notebook because it is a key element within the judged events, and talk about best practices there. A little bit about the team interview process. I'd like to spend some time today in the next hour talking about scenarios that may encounter, talking about when you encounter students that maybe have differences or social cueing and things like that, maybe some situations where you're not really comfortable with what needs to be said or what shouldn't be said. We'll talk a little bit about conflict of interest, how to volunteer, your certification information. If you read your flash, is actually going to be a little different this year, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. So what are some of the roles of a FIRST Tech Challenge judge? And when I sit down and think about my experiences, I kind of break it down into these three types of roles, where as a detective, your role that day is to start learning the team's stories, find out more about the teams. This is an attempt to create a truly positive experience for the kids. Along the way, you're going to find that you're creating a very positive experience over the day for yourself and for the people that you're working with. It can be really energizing. So you want to be that detective. If you feel like there's something there that's really interesting, but they haven't brought it up, part of our role as a judge is to find out a little bit more. Maybe there's a quiet student that seems to have a lot going on in the background but doesn't like to talk about himself or herself. Those are important things. I think also you have a role as an advocate, especially in the judge deliberations. So when we do team interviews, you're not going to have an opportunity to talk to every single team that morning in that team event. So when you see something that really excites you in our judge deliberations, being an advocate for what those teams' accomplishments are and what they're working on is indeed a role that you play as a judge. And lastly, I think the judging team as a whole is there to help the students celebrate their accomplishments, their achievements, what they've learned through their process. And a lot of them come from a lot of different places in the FIRST experience. And so finding those valuable lesson points where students have achieved either more self-confidence or other things, that's a part of what a judge does. Because of the technology, I'm not even going to try to play the Woody Flowers video, but there is a link in the PowerPoint slide presentation where there's about 1:20 where Woody talks about what he believes gracious professionalism is. And I think the more we talk about it, both within ourselves as adult volunteers and with students as they are participating in FIRST, the more effectively we create that culture. All right. And if we don't talk about it, then sometimes in the stress, people fall into habits. But to me, gracious professionalism is working hard, doing your best work, but you need to make sure that you're treating people with respect and kindness. So once again, even if you are, we talked a little bit about evaluating students, and feedback processes. The idea behind providing feedback to teams, once we eventually get there, is that idea of creating an era of respect and learning out of that process. And likewise, as you interact with everybody, whether it's other volunteers, As a judge, you're going to find yourself interacting with a whole host of people, whether they're on the field, whether they are behind the scenes making things happen in the judging rooms, the people that are manning the volunteer oasis. And in each of those interactions, I think it's really important to have that gracious professionalism up front. Thoughts and comments about gracious professionalism? Sorry, I'm going to try to make this interactive. So
always treat everybody with respect.
yeah, you know, and what I find too, as I work with students, say as a mentor, maybe out of the judging role, but in a mentor role, what I find myself trying to do is to watch my choice of words. And again, it's especially if I'm providing feedback or counseling. You know, we work in our particular shop on really promoting the inclusiveness. And inclusiveness to kids, they don't even recognize sometimes when they might be in a group talking about something. And lo and behold, here's that new student that joined recently, but they're on the periphery and not within the circle. And, you know, counseling and working with kids, engaging to say, hey, Parker, why don't you show Matt, you know, what you're going to be working on here with this particular machine, you know, and connecting them. So I think that's some too of as we promote gracious professionalism. Inclusiveness can be a lot of different things. And it's for sure we've got a lot of students with different skills. Speaking of skills, the skills of a judge, I think what we're looking for are people that are comfortable working together. The best part about being a judge is there isn't anything that you are responsible for by yourself at an event. And that can be really comforting to somebody that's walking in new. It's like, you don't have to completely remember any of this because we will set you up so that you're working with somebody that's been through it before. You work these things as a team. So therefore, the skills involved in good judging have to do with people that are collaborative or enjoy working in the teams. The oral and the listening, you're asking questions, you're asking open-ended questions to get the most information, and then you're listening carefully to answers so that you can get follow-up questions out there. I think it's important to recognize that our judging teams, you don't have to know much about FIRST. You don't have to be an engineer. And in fact, the best judging teams, the most successful teams, have people that have educational experience, perhaps in the classroom, paired with some business expertise for what it takes to actually run a project or run a team or run a business, deadlines, things like that, failures, understanding how failure helps the learning environment. I also believe that judging is a great way to introduce people to FIRST. So, you know, for you here in judges training, as we are setting up an event, and we were talking about FIRST Lego League as well as FIRST Tech Challenge, you know, finding new people to bring in and getting them involved in a team that has done this before adds perspective, and I think it adds to the visibility within the community. This is some neat stuff going on with these kids. Other thoughts about skills? What have you found that really serve you well?
I would agree when I'm setting up teams of judges. I don't want all technical people on the same panel. I want a mixture of different people because you get a different perspective.
Right.
And bringing in new people into the team is just really important. I have yet to recruit a new person who has never judged and have them walk out of the competition going, I hate that.
Yeah.
Their answer is always, make sure you ask me next year.
Yeah. And again, I think as judges and going through the judge training, it's important to emphasize too that as a volunteer, you're giving up a significant portion of your day. You're also going to do some preparation work. And we want to create the kind of experience where people say that was definitely worth it. So I think, like I said, judging, I'm very high on it. Sometimes people need to be invited, and that's a good thing. Running into somebody at my workplace saying, I think you'd be a great first LEGO League judge. You'd be a great first tech judge. And they're kind of like, well, I've never done that. Are you free this day? Because I'd like to introduce you to that. So those are all important things. During the event, again, a First Tech Challenge event, especially at the league level, is a one-day event. State championships, world championships are multi-day events. But during the event, generally judges are involved in team interviews. There's a review of the notebooks from a variety of judges for a variety of purposes. Some of the judges will observe the competition matches, looking for not just technical capabilities, but also team interactions. And again, sharing of information, building consensus, that's a big part of judging. I think the key thing about an event is you're never going to have as much information as you want. And I think it's important to emphasize that the awards that you make as a judging team are arrived at with a consensus, and that team that is receiving that is a good model for that award. I stop to say best because best is, again, subjective and difficult to know, especially if you feel like you have lacked information that might have resulted in a different best. You should be satisfied and you should be happy as a judging team if you've identified the teams that are very, very good models with the requirements for a particular judged award, and they represent that award in a positive fashion. One of the most fun aspects of being a judge is writing the award scripts. And again, here in Iowa, we like to do it up grand. We have some very cooperative MCs, and we try to pre-coordinate that. But judging is not a serious business in First Tech Challenge. So when you walk into the team interview, you're having fun. Your job is to put the students at ease and make sure that they're having fun too. All right, again, time commitment, we spoke. To me, it's a significant time commitment, but not unrealistic. The championship events run probably 10 to 11 hours on a given day. For state or worlds, again, it's a multi-day. The preparation that's involved in judging, I would estimate takes maybe a couple of hours, 2 to 4 maybe. There is some certification that's very, very helpful, having to do with videos that speak about judging in a little bit more detail than this training session. The manual piece, to me, is a portion where it helps you delineate the different awards and the different requirements for the awards. You don't have to memorize it, but you want to read through it ahead of time. And honestly, you may want to have certain resources available to you that day, like the award descriptions that you refer back to. We will talk a little bit more about the certification process on FIRST website because they're not using Schoology this year for that. All right, so engineering notebook. Most of the judged awards, about the only ones that aren't, are the video related awards, all right? Everything else, especially at a league championship, does require the submittal of an engineering notebook. If you read the game manual carefully, there are actually very few requirements. And we'll talk a little bit more about that, but there's a whole lot with respect to if you want to put yourself as a team in the running, they're pretty explicit about some of the requirements. Kids struggle with this, and as a mentor, all I can tell you is I hear my mentors in our shop reminding the kids, did you capture that for the notebook? Did you know, and so once again, I think elevating that, if you work with FTC teams ahead of the judge championship awards, you know, a realization that the notebook is not so much a burden as it's like writing down your roadmap. It's definitely your journal of your journey. It's a diary, that's correct. And we've seen them put together in a lot of different ways. They do have some guidance, but some of them are very heavy on the technical decisions. Some of them are very heavy on what they've done as a team, whether that's the local Old Settlers Parade or demonstrations at the library, things like that. It can be what the team wants it to express, and to me, it should be an expression of the team. There is a complete file resource that I've added the URL to on engineering notebook guidelines that's out there. That's available for judges. It's available for teams. Okay, so as I mentioned, the only thing that the first manual really speaks to as requirements is that you need to have a team number on the outside front cover, a number. If somebody walks in and doesn't have the number here in Iowa, and they even encourage it, make sure we've got a Sharpie at check-in and let them get a Sharpie and get that on their notebook as they turn it in. Also, they should have no more than 2 notebooks per team. And this is not an overly prescriptive situation at leagues. To me, it goes up as you head towards championships. There's been debates in the past, what's 3-inch, what's 4-inch? 3-inch has stayed the standard requirement for the last, 3 years. I mean, it's a standard requirement. So I am hopeful that teams understand what a 3-inch binder is, because that's how they sell them. Here's a 1.5 inch, here's a 2 inch, here's a 3 inch. Okay, there are a lot of recommendations though. And again, there are requirements for awards, but maybe not the notebooks. But the recommended sections are basically broken into 3. And again, there may be requirements for certain content. So engineering, team information, and a team plan. Now that team plan, as the manual speaks about it, could be a lot of different things based on what the team wants it to be. Could be, how are they going to recruit new members? It could be, do we have to do fundraising? Or maybe they don't do fundraising at all. What's their strategic plan? Have they written down goals? Maybe they've captured individual member goals and wrapped that into a team goal of some sort. As long as they've given some thought and clearly delineated that this is our plan for our team for this year. I'm going to catch up with my notes here real briefly, because a lot of these slides I really didn't make notes on. But I think the next one I had. So I think this is important. I've ran into this. New notebooks every year. Again, if they bring along last year's notebook, it's not a disqualification, but it's not being judged. And if they brought that as one of their 2 notebooks, then yeah. But it does call that each team should create a new notebook each year. Now, a lot of teams have moved to electronic because they take pictures and they're all on their phones anyway, right? And that's good. Handwritten is good. There is no differentiation, okay, in the judge room between which is better. It's not a measurement of better. Handwritten, electronic, they are both given the same weight. To me, some of the differentiators are how well have they captured their whys. So when they're doing things, why did they do this? And the more that they can write down in that area, that's a good thing. So the summary page is not, let me shake my mouse to make sure, yep, we're good. So the summary page can be 1 to 3 pages. It should talk a little, it's sort of like your Cliff Notes. It's your executive summary. It's all those things as they hit college and beyond. What are the highlights? What's the roadmap if you want the judges to take a look at something you did that was super creative in a manipulator design? have that in a summary page. In judging, I think we talk some too in the Think Award that oftentimes you're looking at notebooks that are very complete, that answer really great stories about the whys. But sometimes the summary page can be a differentiator in terms of, you know, who really mapped out their journey and maybe has internalized their journey, because some of that summary page is a recognition by the team of, we think this was really cool, and it's some reflection involved. So let me stop for a minute. Any other thoughts about engineering notebooks? They're a key element in evaluating awards. Some of them are super skinny, and some of them are super fat. Any thoughts?
So from the judging perspective, when we're reviewing these, what do you think is the most important thing to focus on, or the most relevant piece? Because usually, if you're doing notebooks, you only have a few minutes for each notebook, and if they're super dense, kind of hard to parse that out into what's, especially if the team doesn't necessarily provide highlight pages or things like that.
Right. That's a great question, and I'll repeat it for our video people, but you know, what should we focus on when we're reviewing notebooks as judges? And you know, you encounter the situation where you've got roughly 5 minutes as a team of judges to take a look at a notebook that may be very elaborate. If there is no summary page, I like to try to flip through it quickly enough to identify 1 or 2 things that I want to ask questions on. Then the notebook, even if you're not working on the notebook review itself, it becomes a source of information. Say if you're evaluating one of the outreach awards, like Connect, all right, to understand in a little more detail how they've connected with their engineering and technical community in a larger sense. So honestly, the first review kind of is going back through. There'll be some teams that will come in and want to highlight their presentation with, if you'll turn to this tab in their notebook. And you know, clearly that's a team that has organized their thought process around, yeah, this is really important to us. I think as a judge, I come back to my original comment also, that when you're a detective and learning their story, a lot of that process is trying to recognize what's important to the kids. And maybe they didn't build a fabulous robot, but they really spent a lot of time connecting STEM and trying to encourage younger students in the elementary grades. That's going to come out in a lot of different ways. And I think as judges, those are areas where we key off of. You know, I'm not going to spend a lot of time in the limited time we have on the technical side if I can recognize from the teams that maybe that wasn't their primary goal as a first tech challenge team in the first place. Thoughts on that?
I guess when I look through a notebook, I'll flip through the notebook in a couple of minutes and kind of pass by the whole bio part, because every team has that. I'm going to spend my time flipping through, quickly looking through the part that they have on the robot, the engineering. Does it really show the story of the team designing, building, creating the robot? You can really do that pretty quickly, but you can get a pretty good sense, is it there, isn't it there? And I'm going to look at their outreach. Their outreach, was it themselves? Was it them with other teams? Did they do a little bit of outreach? Did they do a lot of outreach? And again, I'm just kind of looking at the 50,000-foot level. Then I'm going to look back at, do they have a business plan, fundraising, kind of those pieces. So I'm kind of back what your original slide was. Look at those 3 different pieces, and you can only do that in 3 or 4 minutes.
I'm looking for general completeness. Usually, is there some kind of, do they do any drawing? Do I see any math in the notebook? Do I see CAD drawings or screenshots put in?
Right.
I did the pictures just because you don't really have enough time to read the text on each page.
Right.
So you can get an idea of what the story is, story of the robot, story of the outreach.
And most of these students aren't planning completely verbally or written. They're actually drawing something.
And in fact, seldom do they do a fabulous job at narrative, because they just, it's not their thing to write unless you happen to get that rare student. But if they can tell a picture, if they've spent a session scribbling on a whiteboard with math and trajectories and a little bit of geometry, and they capture that in a screen snapshot, and they have some comments about what they were doing there, then that could be a question, that begets that question.
And that gives you that story.
Right. For those of us that have been around for a very long time, before electronic became as popular perhaps as it is now, when they were doing handwritten notebooks, there used to be a big thing of trying to create it in the fashion of an old style engineer's notebook if I were working on a classified program and trying to do patents. And there's really not the requirement to cross-hatch out. There used to be a requirement when I was doing a handwritten notebook. If I had only filled to this half of the page and I'm starting my next meeting on a clean sheet, they would want you to cross-hatch everything. That's not a thing.
Probably a good thing, because I'm sure because it'll make a lot of cycles.
Right, and again, it was a process where they didn't really understand, and I think if they eventually wind up in a field where
They have to do that.
yeah, the patent ability, if you're working in a laboratory environment where you're trying to capture intellectual property, they pick that up. I think the journey here is helping them to learn that it's important to write things down. About the third time that they have created the same problem in their robot design, I'm in the shop telling them, please write it down. What did you do? What didn't work? Write down the results of your testing. Yeah, we tested this.
Another
Right.
Another compliment you said, there's like the rare student who does excel in narrative, along with how we can't prefer an electronic versus a handwritten notebook. I think that it's unfair to say you can only have, it's wrong if only one student contributes, because oftentimes there is only one student who wants to do it. So while you should get input from everyone, I don't think it's necessary to have everyone be involved in the actual construction of it.
And that's a good point too. I think they used to require students to at least 2 sign off on every page, and I don't believe that's a requirement anymore either.
I think that was a recent change too that they stopped requiring.
Right. You can tell if the team is engaged at all levels through your interviews, both with the team and in the pits. And I think that comes back to, did the person write the notebook in a vacuum? And if that's the case, then you're going to find out the team doesn't know
What's in the notebook.
what's in the notebook. Yeah. And so there are ways, I think, in judging to get to that heart without, again, decrementing. And I come back to, we're not trying to score these kids in a judging event. It's not a score. It's not a grade. It's what have they done? What's noteworthy about their achievements? And how can we help them celebrate that? Very good.
Maybe to help them learn what things they can do better.
Yeah. And the good news is I'm halfway through my slides, so I think we're doing really well. So let's talk a little bit about the interview process. So within a judged event, you're going to see teams lining up in a particular area of the event away from the fields. And there is a cadence that goes through where each teams have an opportunity to present to a panel of judges. So in those interviews from a judge's perspective, judges are going to work in teams of 2 or 3. Getting back to that point of there isn't anything you're going to have to do by yourself. And here you're going to have some time with the team members. You're going to be able to see the robot. It's somewhat more quiet, and you've got the engineering notebook available. So again, this is a place where we want to be modeling gracious professionalism. Our role is not to stump the kids. Our role is to encourage them with what they've been working on and to help understand their story. So within a team interview, let's take, again, back to a league event. Generally, you've got 10 minutes with the team. You're going to have 5 minutes ahead of the team coming into the room to take a look at the notebook as a group. And then you've got 5 short minutes to do a little bit of discussion about what you just learned about the team, to capture some notes, and to evaluate the team for whether they would be a good candidate for some of the award categories or where they seem strongest in. That's a busy morning. So that particular judge team, if you've got a 24-team league event, you're probably going to see between 6 and 8 teams. Seldom do we really get to see only 4. So as a judge, all I can tell you is find a system where you can take good notes. If you have a laptop or a tablet, bring it. Whatever helps you to take individual notes. I think we will capture some of the information as a judge's team, but notes are super valuable, because by the time that you get to team number 4 in your list of 6, it becomes a little bit difficult to remember key details about team number 1.
The other thing I would emphasize is each judge should be taking their own notes,
Yes.
because what I value as important may not be what you saw as important.
And I would echo that thought again. My notes are pretty illegible to anybody but me. And so, but once I write that down, it could be I wrote down a word and that helps me remember a conversation. So whatever works for me is what I want to do. Here in the team interviews, they have signed the first consent forms that allow us basically to take pictures. And just like the kids, okay, I'm to a point where a picture of the team, picture of the robot that we take, we always ask their permission first. And if for some reason there is a no, or let's say there is a student or a group that doesn't want to be in that, that's fine. Okay, do not press that you have to do that. But it's a useful mnemonic, especially in deliberations, to have access to that information.
And on timing, so 5 minutes before, 10 minutes with the team, I've had judges ask previously, what happens if I've run out of questions? Can we end early? And I think it's maybe detrimental to the team to end early, because you haven't given them the full amount of time that they were guaranteed to be able to share their story.
Correct.
I found it's sometimes helpful to have some sort of maybe generic questions that you can ask every team, because I know usually with the judge's manual it has some suggested questions. I find it's helpful to both highlight ones that you want to ask each team, but then also have a couple of even just asking about their day at the event, what things they've enjoyed, and sort of maybe trying to emphasize those points. It's a good way to fill in a convention.
Okay, and Lauren, I appreciate that. I think as a judge advisor, those are important points to make with the judge teams. Oftentimes, I've got judges that want to expand, and I'm like, no, we really have to be fair to the teams in the fashion that, we can't just continue to explore interesting areas. But I agree, likewise, there should be information. It's an opportunity to gather information that we can't pass up. Generally, at the events here, we try to have people that are monitoring time for us. Time is not, to me, as rigid in First Tech Challenge as it is in First Lego League. But we want to be respectful of the time and being even in our application of that. The other comment that I'm going to make, and they didn't cover it, again, it's not a change, but I think it's important for judges to recognize that we want the teams to be comfortable in their presentation. Many of the teams out there are going to come in and they have a presentation they have prepared. And it's important that the judges team gives them at least half of that time, and maybe more, all right, to do nothing but present. I tend to want to ask a question when I hear something really interesting in a presentation. As judges, though, we need to write those questions down, because that sort of disruption, especially for kids that are kind of nervous, tends to create, again, not a positive experience for the kids. So in that interview process, there are 2 or 3 steps that you go through. One of them is, did you apply for the control award? And generally, you've already found the application in their notebook. Sometimes somebody may hand carry it in, but usually it's there in the notebook. But when you ask at the beginning, it helps highlight if you didn't find it and they said yes, we can do some things to try to track it down. Maybe it got stuck in the bottom of a box. So you're going to ask them if they've applied. That's the one award that they do apply for. And then you basically ask, do you have anything prepared for the judges? And some of the teams launch right in and they've got a full presentation and take good notes because they've got a lot of information they want to share with you. There are some teams, especially rookie teams, that haven't been to a judged event ever. They come in and they're like, I don't know what we're supposed to do here.
They'll just look at you and they'll just be like, yeah. So you'll have to prepare a presentation and it'll be pretty obvious pretty quickly that if they don't have anything. So always have those questions.
Correct. And that is, I think, gets back to Lauren's point of be prepared to ask questions for up to 10 minutes as a group. And over time, especially getting back to that idea of judge groups having different expertise, somebody may be focusing on technical questions, design questions, how things work questions. What did you do? What did you find that failed and how did you improve on it? And then somebody else may be there to able to ask, so what did you learn? What's the most interesting part? Why do you do First Tech Challenge? And those answers are illuminating, I think.
As you do the judging usually after a session or two, you'll kind of figure out who on the judging team is preferencing towards what types of questions. You get a rhythm going.
Right.
Allowing other people to ask questions.
And coming back to that emphasis on giving the kids a positive experience, because that's really what we're doing as judges. Perfectly okay to get up, walk around, if you think about the rooms that we set up, sometimes it feels like there's a physical barrier of these tables between us and the kids. And then the other thing that you will notice is some of the kids, the team will line up. If we've got a room that's this big, they'll line up back here and the judges are sitting where Lee is. And if you're in my room, it's like, no, come closer, and that helps the interaction, because if they're creating a physical gap, and it's okay to do that again in a very gracious and invite them forward. Ask them, can I get up and take a look at your robot a little bit more closely? I really want to see how this mechanism works. Those sorts of things, I think, really get them into the flow, because even the kids that have nothing planned for their presentation, if you can get them engaged, they've got a lot to say about what they've been working on and what they want to share.
This is a side note on not interrupting like the flow, and once you get the students talking, that I've been in judging rooms where some of the other judges have not turned off electronics and or silenced them. And so a judge answering their phone in a judging interview is going to give a horrible signal to the team that they're not paying attention, they're not worth their time.
Right. Now, I use my phone for a timer on the desk. And so occasionally I'm trying to wake it up. But, those are differences. And again, I think those are important things. Again, it gets back to, are we treating everybody with respect at the event?
Just be mindful of what left
And that's where I really like having a timer in the room. So as a judge, I don't have to pay any attention to the time. That I can have the timer get my attention, that their 5 minutes is up, and then I can choose to let them continue with the presentation or start to interject with questions.
Right. Now, I will make a comment that while that's great, some of that is dependent upon the number of volunteers available at any given event. And if they've only lined up, people to queue, then you may find yourself having to rely on the queuer who's chasing down teams for their interviews to also discreetly provide some signals. And so, again, be flexible with that day. And if we've got the ability to add timers to every room, I personally find that me trying to time as well as judge, again, doesn't always work out that well, because I don't have my undivided attention on what the kids are saying.
I have found it's also worth asking the judge team. So I know everyone's having judges over having timers. So if there's an enough, the timers will often be turned into judges. But sometimes, like, I have a watch that's really convenient for like just keeping time, so I can really subtly just keep it, and it vibrates just very lightly when it's time up. So I can actually keep time pretty easily without having to divide my attention. But it's worth asking your team if someone on the team has that capacity and can just kind of do a little signal of, hey, 5 minutes or 3 minutes or whatever.
Or
Super.
in the like initial, do you have a control award? Do you have a presentation? Just so you know, I'm not on my phone, I'm keeping time.
Yes,
Yeah.
and sometimes just playing that on the table so they aren't offended when you're, they don't misinterpret what's going on.
Right. Okay. Here in Iowa, you can have observers, all right, in the team interviews. So if parents say, can I come in? The answer is yes. They, again, a lot of this as a judging team, I want the team front and center. And so I don't want parents behind me, the judge people taking pictures. If they want a picture of the team, maybe they can either take it before they start, or frankly, the best time would be at the end, once everybody's kind of loose and, if they want a photo. But I don't want photos being taken behind me as a judge. Parents and coaches can be in the back. And again, I almost encourage those people to come in as silent observers, because that's a great form of feedback to the teams, which takes us to this particular slide. There was a call for information. There is not an implementation plan this year for First Tech Challenge feedback. So again, at least so far as we know, moving into the season, we do not provide feedback in First Tech Challenge to the teams. So how did my interview go? What should we work on? The best that we can actually encourage them to do, there are resources to do a team self-reflection worksheet. So especially if they come in and they've done, and they are able to move on to a super qualifier, if there's somebody, go practice, fill the sheet out, figure those things out, get parents to listen to you, etc. There are opportunities to establish judge practice days as part of the leagues. I think the Quad Cities folks do that. I think they're talking about doing it on this. Okay, super. So again, it's a nice opportunity because it's the one place where they can get some feedback. It'll be verbal on what to do, maybe how to spread, the talking amongst team members as they're answering questions, things like that.
Just emphasize that is different than FLO where feedback is given.
Correct. And that's why sometimes teams are surprised, or coaches are surprised if they've moved from Lego League into First Tech Challenge
It's a bit of
at the fact that there is no feedback here. All right.
Those judging practice days, are those leagues doing that toward the end of the meet season then, or kind of where are those scheduled in? Because it seems like if you do it early in the season, the teams have no presentation or anything.
Yeah, and they don't have that much to talk about. So honestly, with the league championships falling this year, I think pretty much all in January. December is a great time. If they're towards the end of January, maybe right after they come back from Christmas break, holiday break. So
Can they get feedback at that time?
during judge practice days, absolutely, verbal. So, and if you're curious about how to set those up, in the event coordinator manuals, they're in the resource library. The event coordinator manuals have some information on how to set up a judge practice day. And you'll want, again, you can get parents and people involved, and you run them through. You probably want something for them to work on during these other, during the interview process. So maybe they can have a scrimmage. It's not scored, but they can come and work on robots or things like that.
Okay, so you're not doing this as part of a big meet then?
No,
This is
it's not. It's a separate
completely
event.
separate,
It's a
okay.
separate event from a league meet. And so you may have a scrimmage. In these cases, First advises that other teams could send a single representative in to observe other teams also. And again, they provide guidance on that in that event coordinator manual. Often you'll probably want to get as many people to do the judging and the feedback as possible to shorten the event. Because otherwise a team has 10 or 15 minutes, but it takes them 4 to 5 hours. And again, the burden is largely on the judge volunteers, because you're going to want to assemble some thoughts, and then there is a feedback session afterwards. But if you want, if this is something you're interested in the leagues that you're involved with throughout the area, talk to Rebecca. She seems very open to the flexibility involved in giving students that kind of opportunity. So my guess is about any way that the league thinks they want to try to structure it, run it by her, and I think she's going to support that because it gives the students skills.
So the feedback that you're giving, is that right after the team has a presentation, or is this done as a large group, kind of general? What we saw today was.
No, so the feedback, as I understand it, is specific to the team. However, you may not do that with the observers. This is where you may want to give some thought to how you want to structure it. Go through the first recommendations in that event coordinator manual. But as I saw it, you run everybody through, the judges make notes, and then you provide the feedback. I've done it where we gave like immediate feedback. So we ran it, in a 10-minute increment, and then took another 5 to 10 minutes for that team just to give them feedback.
Presumably after you would usher out the observers.
Correct. Again, the magic there is choice of words, gracious professionalism, making sure that it's positive and constructive. But I think it's something that, we can certainly explore.
That comes back to that communication.
Right.
Giving good feedback is probably one of the most interesting and complicated parts of being a judge, I think.
The most interesting and complicated part of being a supervisor too, out in the workplace. So, finding the way to express that so that people accept it, that they can learn from it, and they can build on it. That's a valuable skill. All right, we got 10 minutes left, right, or less. So let's do a little bit of group discussion, and we don't have to blow through all of these, but let's say you've got a new judge. They've come in as an engineer, and they start quizzing, and you can tell they're kind of focused on, they don't believe the kids actually built that robot. So they're trying to stump them with how something works and things like that. So you're in that judge panel in that room, the judge advisor's off having coffee and donuts. What do you do as a judge?
I've been in scenarios like that. And so I'm not a technical individual. So I kind of laugh and say, oh man, that's a hard one. I don't even know that. I'd like to know more about how you came to this, like not the how, like it works, but like how they got there. So I try to direct it that way.
Okay, other thoughts?
Since I would do the same thing, rephrase the question, or if they just got the team completely rattled, completely redirected in an entirely different direction.
Okay.
And then after we're done with that set of judging with that group, when they walk out, then we're going to have a very heart-to-heart discussion.
Right. So
Because I've been in that situation.
I have too. That's why I wrote it down. It's like we've run into these things, and I think that again gets back to the gracious professionalism. Get the team out of the room afterwards, and then redirect the volunteer. Right. If you have problems with the second situation, then at that point in time, if I were a judge, I would get the judge advisor involved. So after that second team, if that individual, that judging individual, was still very hard bent on creating a very intense and stressful situation for the students, then kind of take a break, get somebody, hey, I want to talk to the judge advisor, and get them involved. So those would be tools, I think, in your toolbox as a judge.
And I might be tempted to emphasize too that it should be more about the design process, not about the specifics of how it works. I probably try to emphasize that to the judge.
They are junior high and high school students. They don't need to necessarily understand how. Yes.
Well, I had one judge who, so what would a real world application of this robot be? And I had to explain to them after the first team was out, this robot is geared to this game. It doesn't have to have a real world application.
And as a matter of fact, next year the game will be different in this.
And well, why
deconstructing
wouldn't it have a real world application? This is geared to the game. And then he kind of went, Oh.
Yeah.
It was fun
And-
after that.
And I think, again, helping people that aren't accustomed to this get into the right mood, the right frame of mind is all very valuable. I think this one we've already talked about a little bit. You are going to see some teams that come in, it's their first judged experience. You may have just had a team in that spoke for 8.5 minutes at length, very eloquently about everything they've been working on. And here comes a team of 5 students, first experience in first. They've got a robot that barely moves, that kind of got a push bot going on. What do?
Ask them why and are you enjoying yourself?
Yes.
Are you having fun?
Yes.
What was your favorite part? Things like that.
This is one where I'm gonna break the glass. I'm gonna make sure I get up, walk around, and look at the robot. It's amazing how often, if you get up and walk around the table, the team just kind of calms down. And then just start asking about, well, this is an interesting design of the robot. How did you come up with this piece? How did you come up with this piece?
Right.
And get them to start talking about what they're doing. And I'll use part of the presentation of even sort of education of, so how did you guys come on the team? So what are your plans next year for how you're going to get new students on the team?
So they might not
how do you
have an
come up-
answer prepared for that, but it gets them thinking.
It gets them thinking about that. How are we bringing in mentors? How would you bring in new mentors? Start getting them thinking of things in the future.
Thank you. I'm going to skip forward to this particular one. So you've got a team of 12. And there's one child that is just super excited. And you can tell that they don't always follow some of the social cues, and maybe they've even practiced, and they're immediately jumping in and interrupting, or maybe they want to answer all the questions. What do you do?
That's a common scenario too, I think. 'Cause a lot of teams usually have one person, maybe not necessarily to the extreme, but they don't have a spokesperson. I think in situations like that, I try to maybe directly address team members or ask questions to different team members a little bit more directly rather than asking the team broadly.
Okay.
So try to get more people sort of speaking out.
I have used a technique too, where if you're picking that up, maybe I will actually make them go all the way down the line. So what do you like best? What do you like best? You know, and something that's pretty innocuous, but gets everybody kind of back in, yeah, I'm a part of this team too. The challenge with the directed question is you also don't want to
Make them feel
rattle
like they're
them.
on the spot. you know.
And maybe the open-ended question for the student that said absolutely nothing is, so what do you do with the team? What's your role?
Or what was your favorite part, or
Yes.
what was the best part, or what was one fun thing you did this
Well,
one?
see, some teams I know that, well, these people are do their outreach, these do the programming, these do the drive, you know, they break it up that way that this person may not know what this person's doing because they're not communicating properly within the team either.
Right. So I'm going to go ahead. It looks like I didn't follow my slides at all, and we'll talk a little bit about judging practice days. We had some questions. Dean's List, I think Rebecca is working to do that a little bit differently this year. If Dean's List interviews are something that you might be interested in, you should definitely talk to the affiliate partner. I don't think it's going to necessarily be incorporated in the league championships this year, which could be a good thing. So again, those are other opportunities. Maybe there's a little less of a time commitment on a given day to be able to do Dean's List. So we talked a little bit about what a judging practice day might look like. Again, this was information that I pulled from the judge practice day. I do have a URL there that you can get more information from and read through in detail. So let's touch real briefly, because I'm standing between you and lunch, on how to volunteer for events. So by now, the approach course is when you have a log-on account, you can log on to firstinspires.org. If you have somebody that is brand new to First, I always start with this. We do have some alternate techniques. If you've got, let's say, the small town banker that's never really done much on computers, we do have some forms and walk-on policies and things like that. But if if you're going to volunteer for an event, create an account. From the dashboard, there's a button, volunteer registration. You can search for an event. As soon as they get them all cleaned up and accurate, you can go through and sign up for that. Certification. So for judging, there are generally 3 or 4 videos. You need to kind of review the judge manual, and then there's a short test. This is how it's been done in past years. It's really designed to help you prepare a little bit further for this. Used to be done on Schoology. That's not how they're going to do it. This year, they're going to actually do it from your logon dashboard. Now, I checked my account yesterday, and it is still not set up. But what you will do is from volunteer registration, which is highlighted in dark blue there. You can't really see, but there's a pending applications line, and then there is missing certifications. So there will be an opportunity in there to actually access the training and certification requirements there, and it'll be tied directly into the FIRST website. And again, it feeds to the VMS so that the volunteer coordinators know that it's been done. You can ask me questions about it, but I don't know any answers. So we'll see. It has to be an improvement. I didn't mind Schoology. It's just I couldn't find Schoology in my bookmarks every year to go back.
And then you had the 2 locations too. So you had the Schoology location you had to go to, and then you had the volunteer dashboard where it was the actual registration.
Right. I think we've done a good job of incorporating some of our best practices, tips, and tricks. Redirect, engage the kids, get the kids involved. We didn't talk a lot about PIT interviews, but PIT interviews, again, you go as a group of 2 or 3 with judges. Do not interview teams by yourself. If one of your judges needs to take a break or things like that, just wait for them and then go. I think our judging teams here in Iowa have been resourceful in finding the teams that might be queued and elsewhere. We tell them to leave a representative in the pit, but sometimes
they don't.
Right.
It's also kind of, if there is just one person, it's also ideal, you want to kind of get the whole team, because it's just the one representative is kind of off the interview with just a single person.
Very seldom do you leave the person that knows what you're really seeking in terms of information. But I just encourage you to be resourceful in a positive fashion, when you go ahead and judge.
Make sure you talk to like the viewers and the people and the other volunteers in those areas, because they can sometimes also redirect you where the teams are.
Correct. I interviewed one guy that last year that was kind of a one-man team, and he had some really interesting stuff going on. Great story to tell. Summarize. We're going to celebrate when we do judging. It's fun. I walk away from those events tired, feet are sore, but energized. All right, and I hope that you all do too. If you find people that are perhaps interested and don't know how to get started, resources, direct them towards Rebecca, direct them towards me. I'm an advocate for Rebecca, and my information's on these slides. Greg, answer the questions you all have experience on. There are a lot of resources out on the FIRST website. Their search engine is getting better. I can find more of them. And most importantly, you don't have to have prior experience. So any last minute questions? All right. Well, thank you all for joining us, and I'm going to see if I can turn off how this recording goes. I'll stop sharing.